Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix. And as you can see from my co-host, James Junkin, it's Mardi Gras season down there in New Orleans. So I'm Dr. Martin, and there's James celebrating Mardi Gras, and we got another episode for you coming up right now. Hi, James.
Hey, my Mardi Gras tree, that is not a Christmas tree. That is a Mardi Gras tree. Mardi Gras is not just Fat Tuesday. It's 12 days after Christmas, all the way up to Mardi Gras itself. So we're in the Mardi Gras spirit. Giving is a lot about Mardi Gras, having a good time, rejoicing with families and friends. And we certainly want to bring that spirit to this podcast because we consider all of you guys that listen to us our friends and our colleagues because we do this for you.
That's right, James. Before we get started today, we're going to talk today about OSHA trends or OSH trends, occupational safety and health trends for 2025, what we see. And this is based on a presentation you gave for ASSP a little while back, but we're going to go through these because I think they're really important. But before we do that, James, everybody knows we're powered by Veriforce. Thank you, Veriforce, for powering almost 80 episodes of the Risk Matrix podcast, but every week we also have a sponsor. So let's take a second and listen to a word from our sponsor before we get started here.
The Safety on the Edge Conference is a premier event that brings together academia, industry leaders, safety professionals, regulatory agencies, and experts to discuss and promote the latest advancements in safety technology, models, and best practices. The Safety on the Edge Conference is proud to sponsor Veriforce's Risk Matrix.
Veriforce is proud to announce the latest version of our Safeland USA accredited course called Basic Orientation 7.0. This is our flagship course that has been taken by over 1.6 million students nationwide. The newest version of this course is shorter than the last version, with condensed training and updated multimedia, but it still includes the same topics as previous courses. As always, the Safeland orientation remains with the employee through the career. It eliminates the redundancy of multiple orientations, and it stores all the training records in a single centralized database for everyone to use. Also, we offer two solutions for getting the training. You can either seek out Safeland training from one of our third-party providers, or you can send one of your instructors through our Train the Trainer program to teach your own employees. If you're interested in learning more, please contact our training sales department at 888-482-9101. That's 888-482-9101. Or you can email us at trainingsales@veriforce.com.
And we're back with the Risk Matrix, James Junkin and Dr. Martin. And again, we're talking about OSH trends. I'm going to let you kick it off, James, because this was your presentation to ASSP.
Yeah, it was an ASSP webinar, again, sponsored and powered by Veriforce. I just happened to be the mouthpiece that delivered this, but this came out of collaboration between ourselves, Dr. Martin, and some input from the Veriforce Strategic Advisory Board to look at the top 10 OSH trends that are heading into 2025. You know, a lot, by the time this episode airs, a lot will have changed. We will have a new administration that certainly may have new priorities. Technology is changing every day. So this was our list based on our collaborative efforts. And we used 4 key criteria in establishing this top 10 list. Number one, it had to have an impact on workplace safety, right? With trends included in the list that had the highest impact to cause harm or serious injuries or fatalities, right? Number 2 was regulatory changes. What we look from a regulatory landscape, what the new administration might do, how the court actions that have happened might impact occupational safety and health, and then the technological advancements, AI, the Internet of Things, all of that is changing rapidly. By the time this episode airs, something else will have changed, and this may be updated. And then, of course, global trends, because we're all interconnected now. When you start thinking about supply chain risk management, trends that have global implications such as climate change, supply chain safety, that was a consideration in creating this top 10 trend list.
So those are the things that helped us create the list, James. But let's explain a little bit why you want to watch for OSH trends, right? And I'm going to start this off. There was a list in your webinar that you had of why it's important to do this. Why is it important to take stock, whether it be every year annually or every once in a while? Like you said, the Internet of Things changes all the time, AI, software's changing, etc. You might want to take stock more often. But the reasons we do this, the reasons you should look for OSH trends and stay on top of them as a safety pro or as a risk professional there are a couple of things. There's brand reputation, right? You want to make sure you're doing the best you can for your company, for your workers, for whoever you impact with whatever service or product that you provide. So brand reputation is important, right? What are some other ones, James?
Hey, proactive risk mitigation. I'm glad I get to say this again. Hazards are best controlled in the planning of the work, right? So if you're looking at trends, whether technological trends or emerging hazards, emerging risk mitigation, ways to put new engineering controls in place, substitution, those type of things, that may come from you analyzing what the trends are in proactive risk mitigation as far as what we've looked at moving into 2025.
We already talked about regulatory compliance. That was one of our drivers for this list. But let's talk a little bit also about employee morale and productivity, right? If you can make things better for your workers as they're doing their job, as they're producing whatever good or service that you're producing, if you can improve in morale, you're going to improve productivity, right? So it's a good thing to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And if you're ignoring trends, let me tell you something. Your workforce is not. They are connected more than ever. This phone connects them to what's going on in the outside world. Constant barragement of news information and social media posts. And I read a study the other day that showed that basically news digestion through normal media means like TV, print, that type of thing is trending down, and social media is trending up. And as you have
easier, it's little tiny bites. It's constant. It's fast. It's coming at you. It's here. I'm not going to say it's the future. It's here now.
It's here
right?
now.
This is how people are getting their news. This is how new trends are disseminated. So we've got to keep up with
Keep
both of
up
that
with it.
and
Your employees are keeping up with it, because sooner or later somebody's going to ask you in a safety meeting, well, why don't we do this? That would make this paper JSA go away. I mean, everybody else is using blah, blah. Why don't we use this? So stay up on the OSH trends, because it affects your employee morale and retention if you can stay ahead on the latest technology.
let me say this: employee morale, retention, right? Productivity goes up, and a lot of times costs go down. And costs go down because we're more productive. Costs go down because we're not having incidents and injuries, because we're up on the trends and we're looking at these things in real time. We're instituting new technologies. We're taking measures as these things are coming up into our viewpoint. So cost reduction is a big one. The last one that we've got in here on why watch for OSH trends is ethical responsibility.
Responsibilities. As a safety professional, as a leader in your organization, you have a moral and ethical obligation to provide a safe and healthy workplace for your employees. So staying informed about what the latest safety trends are, that demonstrates a commitment to protect the well-being of workers and shows that you're being proactive in the identification of risk and hazards in your workplace. And hopefully you're also being proactive in how you manage those risks and hazards.
So let's roll on in. Okay. You had the top 10 things that we got to keep our eye on in 2025. And I think these are really important. First one being AI integration into OSH.
There is no doubt that artificial intelligence, AI, is changing the workplace, not just in OSH, but changing the workplace in general. It's changing our lives in general. Every day something pops up. When we got down to get ready to film this, all of a sudden, hey, I've got a new button called AI Companion on Zoom. Don't know how to use it, but I've got it, right? So AI integration in our daily lives is becoming something that's not going to decrease, it's only going to increase. So AI is now a safety catalyst. When I get with safety professionals, I'm sure you running this too, Dr. Martin, you know, they're talking about things like, how can AI help me with predictive analytics? How can AI help me with hazard identification? Can AI help me with root cause analysis?
Can it help me with real-time monitoring?
Can it help me with real-time monitoring? Hey, what about automating some of these things that I've been doing or my team's been doing by hand and turning some of these safety inspections and audits and all that into a process that draws from the best of everything that's on the internet? So AI integration into occupational safety and health is only going to keep trending, not only in 2025, but in the future. Now, let me say some things about AI integration. AI is like a toddler. It's like my new puppy, right? Sometimes he gets things right. Sometimes he doesn't get things right. It's learning, it's growing. There are all sorts of AI out there. We've had a whole episode. Go back, find our episode with Alan Rice, Dr. Alan Rice, who is one of the world's top experts on AI. We may have him back to talk about all the changes that's happened in the last, 6 months since we had him. Mm-hmm. But look, be prepared for the use of AI, but use AI responsibly. Like, be careful writing policies and procedures using AI, because sometimes the citations are wrong. Sometimes it doesn't have everything in there that it needs to. It's not
garbage in, garbage out.
It's right? Not a replacement for you as a safety professional.
So just keep in mind that as you're feeding it good material, hopefully that's what you're doing, is you're feeding AI good material, and the internet is feeding it somewhat good material. There's also a lot of junk that's going in there, right? So AI is not a substitute for you doing your job, which is keeping things on track and making sure things are properly reviewed, making sure things are working the way that they should. So AI, big thing to watch. Keep it on your radar. Second thing we got on our list here is heat illness prevention standards.
Okay. This is something for us to talk about a little bit later in the presentation of what's going to happen to the heat illness prevention standard, the federal standard that OSHA has put out and should be getting near the final publication of this and then implementation. We'll talk about whether that's actually going to happen a little bit later down our list. But let's just acknowledge this, okay, without getting to the political debate of causes and all that, right? There are rising global temperatures. That is a fact. That is a fact, an undisputed fact that we are working in, okay? Our workers are working in. So whether we have a standard or not, we still have an obligation to protect our workers from recognized heat illness, right?
Here comes the ethical responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're not going to put your worker in harm's way, whether it be a physical hazard or a hazard such as this, which heat illness affects a lot of workers every year. A lot of people die working hard in the heat and not hydrating and doing all the other things that the heat illness standard, if it goes into effect, if it stays in effect, will cover. So we'll table that, okay? We'll table that.
We can argue about whether the standard goes far enough or goes too far, what acclimatization means, and all the details. But all of us need to understand we're working, whether it's indoor or outdoor, in rising global temperatures, right? I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a climatologist. I am just James Junkin, safety professional, right? I can't tell you based on James's research what the cause is, but what I can tell you is what the effect is when we don't protect our workers, which is workers don't come home from high hazard jobs, or they end up in the hospital with some doctor trying to save their life, right? So the trend is, as temperatures rise, we need to respond accordingly within our organizations, whether government is making us do it or not. We have an ethical, moral responsibility, and some would even say a legal responsibility under the general duty clause. All right, but we're going to talk about that moving forward. Okay.
So number 3, James, you got remote worker safety, but I'm gonna put a little kink in this here, right? I've been reading a lot of articles, especially in the last couple months, last 2, 3, 4 months, right, about return to office. Okay, we've got a lot of remote workers out there from COVID, and you know, we got real used to this, you know, working at home and doing our own thing, and we've some people have gotten really productive at it. There are a lot of companies that are mandating, some of the large companies, one of the large companies that you work for, are mandating return to office. Okay, so not only we have remote worker safety, but we got return to office, and we've got to decide how are we going to protect the workers in both scenarios.
Well, I had a question from my webinar. It was a good question. If workers work for home in their home environments, what are our obligations as safety professionals to ensure that that work environment is safe to work at? And that is a great question, right? Most of us just assume if you get hurt while you're on the job, on the clock at home, but you're on our payroll at the time you get hurt, that's an OSHA recordable, right? Okay, so we can, and I agree with that, right? Within the confines of what the OSHA recording responsibilities are. But to what extent, as me as an employer, am I responsible for ensuring the work from home environment for a W-2 employee is safe? Okay.
Well, that's the $20 million question, $100 million question, James. I don't think we're going to get much from OSHA. This is Dr. Martin speaking. I don't think we're going to get much from OSHA on guidance on what to do with these things. But again, this goes back to our ethical responsibility, common sense, and you know, and really kind of taking a hard look at what our employees are doing in their home offices or in their remote work, and also, you know, as they return to work, right? So my jury here is kind of out. The Dr. Martin jury is kind of out. I don't know what's going to happen, but I've seen minimal guidance on things like these in the past from OSHA, and I think that here is where our ethical responsibility and our common sense comes into play.
Well, if OSHA doesn't address it, the court system will. Okay, so we already know what the risks are. Maybe we should do a whole episode and bring in some attorneys to talk about where, when you're talking about work from home environments, where does the obligation to ensure?
I think that's a great idea.
The egress, the regress, the emergency action plan, all this stuff that goes in there, training, safe and work environments, trip hazards, thing of all that. Who's responsible for ensuring that while that employee's on the clock? That'd be a great episode, and maybe we'll do that in the future, right? But there are, we know, issues related to not whether just OSHA is going to cite me, but what about the well-being of my worker, right? Ergonomic issues. I wrote an article, appeared in Professional Safety Journal back in 2020 during the height of COVID, which was COVID-19 and ergonomics. Wait, what? And, you know, now you're starting to see trends in OSH as we're going forward for some remote workers. Some companies are sending people out to help design, ergonomic specialists to help design work from home workstations, because what are we finding? These were not ergonomically sound. People spending too much time at their desk. They're not getting enough interaction. So that's just on the physical health side. Then we've got all these mental health issues that have arisen, like feelings of isolation, right?
Then we're trending towards our next topic, which is mental health.
So there are mental health issues, things of that nature, and cybersecurity threats. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, not just from the work from home environment, but in general as part of our trends. So mental health in the workplace, right?
Mental health in the workplace. Big issues.
Big issue.
And you know, I mean, we're seeing a lot of really good trends out of Europe and some of the European countries on mental health training, looking out for
Australia.
looking out for signs and symptoms of people having mental health problems in the workplace. We know that suicide in construction is a big risk, that we lose a lot of workers every year in such a high stress, high workload environment. So we're seeing mental health training, mental health first aider training. We're seeing, you know, a lot more drug use, substance abuse. So we're seeing Narcan training. We're seeing, you know, some of these things being looked at by like the National Safety Council and whatnot. So
I know some other things out there we're seeing with the remote workers. Zoom, believe it or not, Zoom for its employees, Twitter or X, whatever you call it now. James don't tweet. All right. I just don't tweet because James don't play. Right. That's
James X.
Roll Tide, right? But to address these feelings of isolation and to develop community and water cooler type activities, they're having social hours over Zoom or over Twitter or whatever, to have more interaction, to build collaboration and reduce this workplace stress and feelings of isolation. When you're working from home, you know, we work from home, but I'm in meetings all day talking to a bunch of other people. But can you imagine if you were just a remote worker, data entry, never talked to anybody? You went from being very interactive to now you're at home in the dark, in your cubby hole, working from your sofa or whatever. You know, that's a big shock to people's system. And we're starting to see that there's some negative mental health effects from that. So I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing people come back maybe to the workplace. Whether that's appropriate or not, we can have that debate. But we do know this: there is a mental health crisis, right? Just depends. Just depends. There are a mental health crisis going on across the world that's coming from COVID, right? Some of the results of COVID. Now let's go to the next one: the implications of the Chevron ruling. This is a big one. Okay. New administration, Supreme Court, old administration struck down the what they called the Chevron deference doctrine. Now, what was that? That was a doctrine that said, in the absence of direct language, where there's ambiguity in a law written by Congress, for example, the word reasonable, what does that mean? Right? When there's ambiguity, the court would defer to the interpretation of the agency, whether it was OSHA, the EPA, you know, whatever agency, Homeland Security, whatever agency. When there was ambiguity, the agency would provide the interpretation. The Supreme Court came back and said, no, Congress needs to write better laws that bring out the ambiguity. And if there's ambiguous language, the court will decide, the authorities. Now, that's going to bring into question tons and tons of administrative rulings that have happened. So what's the impact, right? The court system will sort all this out. What do we think that the impact is going to be potentially? We may not have a heat illness prevention standard. It's going to court. 100%.
Regulatory enforcement may be impacted.
Regulatory enforcement may be impacted by OSHA, by the EPA, because they're like, look, I don't want to die on this hill right now. Let's see how some of the court cases go. You know, that's just kind of me and my crystal ball projecting, but I've already talked to some attorneys that practice in these areas, and they've said regulatory agencies, even in the Biden administration, beginning to back off some of their enforcement activities to see exactly what the court may do, what the courts may do. So there's a huge potential impact. You could have increased legal challenges to some OSHA standards that are out there. You could have some definitely challenges that you're going to see in the EPA. So what can you do as a safety professional? Set that aside and keep bringing workers home safe and do your job. Okay.
Use your ethical, moral, and common sense compasses to guide you in those situations.
Absolutely.
So emerging technologies.
It's a double-edged sword, is it not?
It is. It is. Everybody loves the new gadget, the new thing. Oh, it's going to make my life better, but careful what you wish for, right?
Careful what you wish for. As more things become automated and you have the interaction between human beings and robotics and automation and stuff powered by AI, that brings up new hazards and new risks, right? New hazards and new risks. We've already talked about artificial intelligence. It's like a child. It's learning. It's a very smart child. Right? But it's
doesn't mean it's learning all the right things.
Right? What you use that for may be of great benefit. Certain people have found this to make life a lot easier for them. Being able to search the entire internet for information in 5 seconds, 10 seconds to help consolidate thoughts and processes and give you a base of information is outstanding. Well, understand there could be a dark side of this as well, right? When we start talking about artificial intelligence, what are we putting out there? Are we putting personal people's information out there? Are we leaving ourselves open to liability?
Yep. So the long and short is, we want to mitigate risk and we want to maximize benefits. And sometimes it's a tightrope, right? Just make sure you're looking at both sides, that you're not just looking at what can this do for me? What can this do for my company? What can this do for, right? Because sometimes what it's doing for you is not as great as what you think it is, right? There are always cons in any situation. Nothing's ever pro. So just make sure you're looking at both sides of the coin. So James,
the Internet of Things, I just want to throw this out there. More and more, this was a question. Why do I need to worry about cybersecurity? Okay. Because there's a tendency for people to think that cybersecurity is just related to data. But as we've incorporated the Internet of Things, more and more physical processors are being controlled by computers that have access to the internet, utilities, water supplies, physical assets
that can hurt us.
Used to be those were on internal loops that were not exposed to the outside world, right? Now, because you've got the Internet of Things, sometimes you can be exposed, valves can be turned, they can be opened, they can be closed, a lot of stuff can happen. So while that's made cost be reduced because we don't need the same number of people to run processes within a plant as we used to because of automation, it also has created vulnerabilities that dark and bad actors can exploit to create additional risk. So technology is good on one side, but on the other side, it raises additional risk. The next one. This is something y'all know you're passionate about, which is COVID-19 long-term effects. The effects of the pandemic.
We're seeing it still, right? I mean, one of the things I complained about originally when COVID was going on was everybody's writing about COVID. What are the effects of COVID? But really, when we were in it, we couldn't really see what the effects were going to be. And now, 2, 3, 4 years out of the real main pandemic, we're seeing workers that have long-term illnesses, right? They have long-term health complications that we have to account for example, in respiratory protection and policies and looking at them, medically to wear respirators and those types of things. We've got increased stress and anxiety from people, right? When's the next thing going to happen? I mean, I got to tell you, it was stressful for me when one day the world was open and the next day it was shut, right? And everybody was afraid to touch anything that wasn't inside their home, to leave their homes, etc. Right? So now we're getting back in the workplace. People are asking workers to come back to return to work or have some type of flexible arrangement. And that, again, all these things are intertwined. We're also looking at mental health crises for some of these people that are being asked to go back to work after they've been home from COVID, 5, 6 years.
And
So
look, I understand if you, for the last COVID, we're now in 5 years of this. If you've adapted your lifestyle to working from home and having a little bit of flexibility in childcare and animal care and all these other things, and then next week you've got to come back to the office and punch that time clock from 8 to 5,
big deal.
whatever. Hey, that is going to be a major disruptor. A major disruptor. Now I'm gonna use your quote. It just depends, right? So Dr. Martin and I cannot make that decision and tell you whether it's better to come back to in-person work or continue your work from home arrangements or have some sort of blend. That's based on your individual situation. But understand there could be complications, and this podcast or this presentation is about what's the OSH trends to look for in 2025. So if you're a safety professional and you're making transitions from work from home to back to the office, there are going to be complications, things you need to think about, right? As you adapt to what was the old normal now becoming the new normal. The old normal was work at the office, then the new normal was work from home, and now the new may be a blend of all that. And all this is a side effect, if you will, of the pandemic.
Yep. Agreed. Now, I wish this next one, James, I wish this wasn't considered a trend, but I guess it is a trend because it's getting more traction, being more talked about, right? Worker empowerment. One would hope, right, that we've been trying to empower our workers throughout our careers, right? I think you and I both have probably been trying to do that, trying to get, stop work authority, get people to speak up, to be involved in the safety program and the risk program. But I think we're getting to the place now where more people are writing about worker empowerment. They're giving us tools for worker empowerment. We're providing more safety and education for worker empowerment. And so, again, this is included as a trend because more of us are adopting these practices into our professional lives.
And I think this is just the natural recourse of generational change. When I came through, you did what you were told because you were told to do it. If you didn't like it, you probably got yelled at. And if you didn't really like it, they just find somebody else. Now, workers are empowered because there are more job opportunities than there are qualified workers to man those job opportunities. So workers can be choosy. Workers can demand more from their organizations. Workers are probably more informed about their rights in the workplace, particularly related to occupational safety and health, than any other generation that there's ever been. If, back in the day, if I had a question about an OSHA regulation, I had to go find a book and look it up and try to figure out where to find it within this big old book.
Now it's just an AI search away.
Just ask AI. It will tell you. So workers are demanding more. They want to be involved in their workplace. They want to be involved in how their work is planned. And that, that's not a bad thing, because the more workers are involved, the better we get data from incident and accident investigations, more honesty. It helps us develop better root cause analysis and corrective actions, and helps build a stronger organizational culture. So just understand your workforce in 2025 and moving forward feels more empowered, right? Yep. They're not just going to do things anymore because you told them this is what needs to be done, or that's the way we've always done it. They want to be involved, embrace that, and you end up with really good organizational culture.
Truth. So James, I'm going to let you take this next one because this is your passion.
Yeah.
And this is what you do. This is what you do for several global clients every day. You work on these types of things, and this is one of the things that Veriforce keys on too.
Absolutely, and that's bringing workers home safe from high hazard jobs across a global supply chain. It's challenging enough as a safety professional to bring your workers home safe that just work for you, right, or part of your subcontractor network. When you are a company now, even if you're based in the U.S. or in North America or in the EU, chances are you have a global supply chain. a global supply chain. So ensuring safety across a global supply chain is challenging because, first of all, there could be language barriers. There could be cultural differences. You have distance and logistical complexities. I'm in one time zone, you're in another time zone. And so that really comes back to need for collaboration. Regulations are different in different countries. Some countries are very advanced in their workplace safety regulations. Some countries are just getting started. So I think as we move into 2025, the trend's going to be, let's get everybody together and have a really good collaboration, and then conducting regular audits and inspections as to the compliance of what the expectations are within our safety management system, right? Continuing what was been the trend since COVID and moving beyond, it was kind of trending before, but I think COVID helped bring this along, was sustainable sourcing practices, sustainability. That portion of ESG, I don't think anybody has a problem with having sustainable practices. How we go about doing that may be up to debate, but as we're moving across a global supply chain, we want to be ethical, we want to be moral, and we want to be sustainable. So as you're developing your safety plan, if you are a hiring client that or a company that has a global supply chain, you want to be thinking about what goes down through that supply chain, even to the smallest member of that supply chain that's a contractor within your network. And the best way to implement a robust supplier safety program, in other words, checking those out, making sure they're compliant, making sure they are sustainable, making sure they're ethical, is through regular audits and inspections.
Amen. Amen. So we're going to hit the last one here. We've kind of talked about it a little bit, cybersecurity and data privacy. You touched on this a little bit. We talked about cybersecurity when it comes to some of our utilities and things that are on an outside kind of automated loop now and those types of things. But we're also looking at the privacy of data that's proprietary to our companies.
How about this? This came out in our webinar. Cybersecurity breaches from work from home environments have increased 400% in the last year.
That's crazy.
400%. So some companies are requiring their work from home folks and other contractors that have access to their networks to have VPNs. So what the trend is going to be is your risk as far as data privacy, cybersecurity, that even gets into the Internet of Things and stuff we talked about, is, hey, we need an organized cybersecurity data privacy policy and plan. We need to train people. And a lot of countries, there are strict laws regarding the protection of employee data. Think about the information a company has on an employee: date of birth, social security number, maybe health issues, workers' comp information, their home address, all these things, next of kin. All that information that's there within your system, that gets breached, you can not only have damage to your company's reputation, you might be able to be held liable for that, right? And that creates lack of confidence when in the work
affects your brand reputation.
Absolutely, man. We don't protect our employee data. What about our customer data? So have a plan that's really a little bit outside the realm of most people in safety to be able to handle. However, it does have safety implications and safety concerns, and it's part of risk, right? So if you are that, even though that may not be your job, if you're listening to this podcast, it is your job to raise these issues, because protecting sensitive employee data is only going to trend as more and more we're incorporating AI and the Internet of Things and data.
Software and data and all kinds of stuff like that.
That is the new commodity of the future. Right?
I don't disagree. So there we go, James. Well, you wanna help do some key takeaways on this?
Yeah, I think it's just important to continue learning. You and I both are passionate about continued professional development, always getting better, the importance of continuous learning. So stay ahead of the trend. These are our top 10 trends of what we think is going to happen in OSH in 2025. but we don't have a crystal ball. The only thing I know about change is constant. Right?
Right. That's right. What we tell you that today may not be true tomorrow, next week, next month, and 3 months. So your job in the risk portfolio management and safety management is to keep on top of those things by being informed, either by social media, if that's your jam, print news, industry publications, just keep on top of things. And you know what? Hey, listen to this podcast, right? Because we bring
Podcast,
this
the
stuff
risk
up.
matrix. Your mama wants you to listen to the risk matrix, but hey,
We bring this stuff up all the time.
industry conferences. I know ASSP sent out some information. They're starting to register for their conference, their PDC that's coming up. Networking with other safety professionals, whether that's in person or in social media. Hey, checking out safety journals. In a past life not too long ago, I was chair of the editorial review board for Professional Safety Journal. That is a good journal to receive. If you're a member of ASSP, you get it every month in digital or in the mail. So staying on top of what's going on in occupational safety and health is not only just a good idea, I think it's your moral and ethical responsibility to do so, because that helps inform the risk assessments that you do in your organization and fosters a stronger organizational culture where we try to reduce the likelihood of serious injuries and fatalities.
Right on. So just to wrap this up, if you guys are listening to this podcast, know that there's almost 80 more, a little under 80 more that you can go on YouTube or Spotify. Both platforms we're on Veriforce's YouTube channel and on Spotify. And every week we drop an episode around noontime on Tuesdays. But you can go back and you can listen to our whole catalog. And we talk about things from risk to subcontractor safety to insurance and other things that affect your risk portfolio in your company. So James, you want to take us out?
Hey man, thank y'all for listening to us. Happy Mardi Gras. Happy Mardi Gras. Get you a king cake from New Orleans. It's king cake season. It's king cake season. We appreciate all of you listening to us and for what you do to bring workers home safe. Y'all keep it up. Till next time, y'all bring those workers home safe from high hazard jobs and roll tide.
Roll Tide.